It must be time for the Audible Friday here in Oxnard, California. Kim Bokamper here with you. Joining me today, Alain Poupart from Dolphins.com. We're going to talk about the Dolphins game with San Diego and what we can expect just 2 days away, and the Dolphins open their season a week late, but open the season nonetheless in San Diego. It will be a unique situation in about a 30,000 seat soccer stadium. To say it's going to be intimate there, I would think would be an understatement from NFL standards.
It'd be quite cozy, the old StubHub Center in Carson, California. But it's interesting. I mean, nice to get things going in week 2. Dolphins opener. It's something we've gone through before for those of us who've been around long enough. 1992, we go back to Hurricane Andrew postponing the opener against New England. Dolphins going out on the road in week 2, beating the Cleveland Browns in the last minute on a Mark Higgs touchdown run.
Yeah, Alan, it's been a strange year so far. We haven't gotten to the regular season. I mean, you open up the season and, a lot of hopes for Ryan Tannehill coming back, and then, as Coach said, you get punched in the gut when he goes down. Then Raekwon McMillan, your number 2 draft pick, who you're really, was setting in there as a starter, making all the calls, getting to the point where he can make adjustments, and then he goes down before preseason game number 1. With an ACL, and you're thinking, oh, woe is me. And then you kind of get through, and then this team kind of goes on the road after the first 2 preseason games, spent 4 days in Philadelphia, come back, go to Minnesota, and think, oh, look, we're going to be home for about, maybe almost 2 weeks, and then Hurricane Irma comes through. So this team has been through more in a short period of time, I think, than most teams can imagine, and it's just getting started for this team.
Yeah, but as you know from Coach Adam Gase, he's not somebody who plays the woe is me card. He's basically his answer every time questions about adversity come up. It's all about we're going to deal with the circumstances we have. We're going to play when they tell us to play. In the case of Tannehill, they were fortunate in that there was a guy sitting out there who's got Pro Bowl ability, who's very familiar with the system, and you can just go out there and get him and pluck him in. And this offense has all sorts of potential with the skill positions players they have, and with Mike Pouncey eligible and available to play at center. Yeah,
and the other thing you talked about, Cutler being there and his relationship with Gase certainly made that transition available. And I think, everyone's looking back to the time that he spent with Adam Gase being his best years as a quarterback, so you hope that transition's over. But kind of going under the radar, too. We lost Ted Larson to the bicep injury. But when you lose McMillan, you're thinking, oh, wow, this was a guy who was supposed to help us with our run defense. But then as soon as he goes down, lo and behold, all of a sudden, Gotcha jumps up there as a guy who was a 5th-round draft pick that I don't think anybody expected to play a big part in this defense, maybe be in that defensive tackle rotation. But he steps in, pushes for the starting spot, and really has proven to be a very active, very disruptive type of defensive tackle, taking a little bit of the hurt away from losing Raekwon McMillan, because now you got another inside guy that can help do what this team sorely needs to do, be better against the run in a big way as opposed to what they were last year.
And in mentioning Gotcha, I think we also should mention Jordan Phillips, who got pushed by Gotcha during training camp, and that's only going to bring his level of play up. He really picked up toward the middle part of training camp and then preseason, to where he showed you more and more of the flashes of the type of guy he can be, and he can be a difference maker for that run defense. And the one thing about McMillan, it's a painful loss, no question about it, but the reality is he was a guy who was going to be on the field when the Dolphins had 3 linebackers, which is not going to be a large majority of the time.
It was like I remember when Paul Soliai was here and they were talking about giving him a big contract. And I'm thinking to myself, well, look, I like Paul Soliai. I like Paul Soliai as a player, but I stand on the sidelines during those games, and 90% of the times he's standing next to me. So you get that position wwhere if you're, it's those positions, a middle linebacker that's not a true cover linebacker that's going to stay in your nickel position, a defensive tackle, when they do their jobs, they come off the field, which is a kind of an interesting byproduct of the success they have, at least to them being on the sidelines a little more. So it does mitigate the fact that McMillan wasn't going to be your 3-down linebacker no matter what happened this year.
Correct. And you mentioned Soliai, which is interesting because Soliai is a guy who, like Jordan Phillips, came in, had a lot of physical ability in his first, 2-3 years. Didn't do a whole lot, was really up and down, and there was some thought at some point where they're just going to get rid of him. And instead, he refocused, emerged, and became like a Pro Bowl guy. And that's the hope for Jordan Phillips. I mean, whether that happens remains to be seen, but that's why you hope that a guy with that kind of ability at some point the light comes on.
And if it's going to happen, it's going to happen with Vincent Taylor and Gottschall, climbing up his butt and forcing him to play that way if he wants to continue to be one of those top dogs in that rotation. He's going to be in the rotation one way or another.
Correct.
It's just a matter of how many snaps is he going to get as opposed to those other young guys. So that's going to be an interesting thing to see. The other thing I think that, and we got Kent Baxter sent this in. I was going to get to this anyway, and he asked, it's all about the offensive line. Do you agree? Well, I think a lot is about the offensive line for this football team. You look offensively, you look at the skill positions, you feel very good from the running back standpoint, from the wide receiver standpoint. You can even slide down to the tight end spot, and if you can get from Thomas what you're expecting from him, as a downfield threat, and then the blocking from Anthony Fasano, you're going to be in good shape. But that offensive line, that really is a question. And to me right now, it's even a little bit more, Alan, than just that left guard, and how's that going to be? I think Steen's going to get the start this week. They got Allen in there that's kind of been pushing for that spot. And then,
Jesse Davis?
Jesse Davis, I'm sorry. Jesse Davis pushing for that spot. But to me, another area of concern that showed up during training camp to me are the tackle positions. And neither one of them played well during training camp. And when you go, especially when you go to the right side and you look at Juwan James, he's a guy that struggled early last year and really struggled throughout the year. And during this training camp, during the opportunities he's had to play in games, hasn't really given you a lot of confidence out of that position. So those two areas to me need to play better than they have up to this point if this offense is going to be as productive as everyone expects it to be.
That's a fair point, and the good thing about this game, or it could be a bad thing, but is we're going to get a pretty good sense of where the Dolphins are at tackle in this game because they're facing a pair of really good defensive ends, Melvin Ingram and Joey Bosa. I certainly agree with you that we didn't see in training camp in the preseason the kind of like really solid play along the offensive line that we're going to see. But again, there was limited reps. Juwan James was dealing with a shoulder issue for the good part of training camp. So I think going in, there's reason to think they're going to be okay there. And again, we're going to get a much better feel for where they are after this game.
No doubt about it. And you get Pouncey now, who's going to be playing not just for a handful of plays during the preseason. He's going to get back in as a steady diet, and as long as he can stay healthy, that certainly kind of helps. He's kind of the glue that brings that whole offensive line together. So that also is another one. Maurice Jones sends a question: is Cutler ready with those receivers? Well, I tell you, the one thing that we've seen about this offense with Jay Cutler standing behind center is that ball's going downfield. That ball he's going to press the field. He's going to press those defensive backs and see what they can do downfield because that's just, look, that's the nature of the beast. Yep. He's a guy that believes in throwing the ball downfield, always has. That's always been one of his calling cards out there. The other calling card for him is he throws it downfield, and a lot of times it leads to those giveaways that are really backbreaking for teams. And I think the goal this year is for Adam Gase to mitigate those situations where he feels like he's got to throw the ball down the field into coverage instead of maybe, throwing the ball away or doing something. And it's going to be interesting to see how that personality of Jay Cutler along with Adam Gase works that out through the course of this early season.
In certain cases, though, I'm not opposed to throwing down the field.
No, not at all.
Into coverage, for example, if it's one-on-one coverage on Devontae Parker, as we saw in the preseason, chuck it up there, let Parker make the play. And the one thing that matches up well with Cutler's deep throwing ability, which is very obvious, is the fact that the Dolphins had a lot of deep threat, not only with Parker being able to go deep and make catches over the top, but you have Jakeem Grant, who showed in the preseason he's ready to bust out. Long pass, and Kenny Stills, who last year took off, had a really, really big year. So the Dolphins have a lot of guys who can get deep. And when you need the underneath throw, you got Jarvis Landry, who's as good as a slot receiver as there is, and Julius Thomas as well.
Pretty amazing, isn't it, that we're going into this training camp. We're looking at Jarvis and Devontae and Kenny Stills, and you're thinking, maybe Leonte Crew jumps up. He's that fourth guy. And I don't think anyone expected the impact of Jakeem Grant when he stepped into that, when they moved him outside and he got a chance to play a little offense. I kind of looked at him as being, look, this guy's got to do one thing during this training camp. He's got to catch punts. And all of a sudden he has emerged as a big-time threat out at that wideout position.
Yeah, no question. Clyde Christensen told us early in camp that they wanted to get him more involved in the offense this year, and I think all of us in the media were kind of like, yeah, sure, sounds good, but let's see if it happens. And in the preseason, you saw that he can make things happen. And to me, this most impressive play wasn't one where it goes over the top. It's the one where he takes a short slant, bounces off 2 tackles, and then sprints away. I think there's no question right now that he's surpassed Carew as the 4th receiver. How much playing time he's going to get on offense, so it might be tough because they got 3 really good ones in Parker, Landry, and Stills.
But, you got that guy that's proven to be a big home run hitter, and you want to get him to the plate every now and then. There's no doubt about that. So he's going to get his chances. Periscope question, do you think we've improved in stopping the run? That's been the question since the season ended last year. Certainly Pittsburgh, they got battered in the playoff game by Pittsburgh. Le'Veon Bell running the football against them with impunity and doing whatever he wanted to do. And so they went out. And I think the addition of William Hayes, it went a big way towards that. And Lawrence Timmons. I mean, we've seen what Lawrence Timmons is since he's been here. We've seen him when he was at Pittsburgh and at Florida State. And I tell you what, this guy is a playmaking beast out there. And it doesn't matter to him if he's rushing the passer, or playing against the run, or going in coverage. He's hell-bent on making something happen almost each and every time the ball's snapped.
Yeah, obviously we won't. I mean, are they improved against the run? Excuse me. We won't know that for sure until the regular season starts. Again, there's reason to be optimistic they're better against the run because you mentioned Gottschall before, and Gottschall looks like he's going to be very good against the run. Jordan Phillips, while he made some plays last year, really, realistically, the arrow has to be pointing up.
Yep.
He can't stay at the same level. Timmons is an upgrade at linebacker in terms of run stopping. And then William Hayes is a huge upgrade in terms of run defense along the defensive line.
Yep.
So they have done what they needed to do to address the situation. Now, whether that produces on-field results, obviously, we have to wait until
Look,
they
and
play
you're going to have safeties. You're going to have cornerbacks come up and get involved in that running game if they want to be as successful as
and
they
have
can.
Rashad
And getting
Jones
Rashad back is a big deal. And then Nate Allen, and then 8 games in, you get T.J. McDonald, who's really going to be. I think everybody, as you could tell by them extending his contract while he's getting ready to go on an 8-game suspension, tells you a little bit about what they think of T.J. McDonald and his ability to make plays. And you talk about a guy coming in after 8 games, refreshed, ready to go. And as he said, when I come back, I'm going to be going 100% and nothing less than that.
And that's a major thumper in the secondary back there. We saw that in the preseason. And you have to imagine just what kind of impression he made, not just from what we saw observing him in practice and in games, but also like in the meeting rooms and everywhere for the Dolphins to that quickly give him an extension. I mean, obviously they liked what they saw.
Yeah, El Chapo Jr. comes out. What do you think of Melvin Ingram's comments about Jay Cutler? Well, if you didn't see, Melvin Ingram was asked what he thinks about Jay Cutler, and he said nothing.
He was asked like what kind of problems Jay Cutler presents, and he said none. Come on now. And the funny part about this is the last time the Chargers or Jay Cutler faced the Chargers, he threw for 345 yards in leading the Bears to win over the Chargers. So obviously he's going to find out on Sunday what kind of problems Jay Cutler
let's look at the Chargers a little bit. Phillip Rivers, has been Phillip Rivers, one of the top production quarterbacks since he's been in this league. Melvin Gordon, a guy that certainly has the ability to run the football. But I know watching the game Monday night and watching the San Diego Chargers, not the same San Diego Charger offensive line. I mean, some of the big guys, DJ Fluker's not there, was a big guy for him last year, and they've had some different changes in there, and they seem to struggle a little bit on the offensive line. So as much as you look on the flip side of their defense and say, we got to deal with Joey Bosa and Melvin Ingram, both of them a sack and a half in the first game of the year, well, you know what? That offensive line is going to have to deal with the Dolphins' revamped defensive line and what they can do. And I know that's a bunch out there that are ready to that are intent on going out and making an impact early in this football season, much like Alan's football team has to. I mean, a quick start has to be part of what is a very difficult road for this football team after what happened last week, in the game delayed to November, going through the hurricane, and then coming out for 3 straight games on the road with San Diego, New York, and then going to London before you come back on October 8th for your first game at Hard Rock Stadium. No doubt it's a tough road to hoe, but somehow, some way, this football team needs to find a way to come out of that 4-game stretch, not sitting at 1-3. Like we were last year.
No question. I'm going to apologize for correcting you, but you keep mentioning San Diego as the Chargers. I know you played there several times, so it's certainly understandable. The thing with the Chargers offense is their big issue is their offensive line and their ability to protect Rivers, who is very, very good. He's got a very strange, unique delivery, but it's quick. But you can get to him because their offensive line, that's been an issue for them for a few years now. And there's one guy on offense that I would think is a guy the Dolphins really want to pay attention to, and that's wide receiver Keenan Allen, who is clearly Rivers' favorite target. I think he targeted him like 10 times in the opener last year, blew out his knee in the first game of the season. And this is a guy who's really good, really smooth. He's a guy they have to watch for outside. Melvin Gordon, he's a quality back, didn't put up very good numbers against the Broncos on Monday night, but he's a guy the Dolphins have to watch. But the key, the Dolphin defensive line has to win this game at the line of scrimmage. And again, it's not a vaunted offensive line they're going up against.
Alan, you've kind of been around this team for the last few days here, with all the things that they've gone through, all the upheaval and everything. They seem to be a pretty focused bunch. I think the transition of getting them out here to Oxnard early into a facility that's absolutely perfect. I mean, you don't have to get in the bus to go to practice. Walk out here, and we're sitting here in the practice field right now, and the rooms are 200 yards away over here, 100 yards, 200 yards away from front to back. So really a great facility. And again, you keep throwing these superlatives at Adam Gase, but I think he's done a really good job compartmentalizing what happened back in South Florida to where we are right now and where the focus should be. And I think he clearly has the focus for each and every guy on this football team away from what's back at home and what's important now, and that's trying to get off to a quick start in Los Angeles against the Los Angeles Chargers.
there you go, Bo. No, I mean, Adam Gase is a guy who's very tunnel vision when it comes to preparing for a football game. And one thing that really helps the Dolphins as well, not that he would have been an issue regardless, but they went through this last year. They spent a whole week in California last year, and then they won the 2 games they played. So coming out here, in terms of preparing for a game, it's kind of old hat for them. And as you mentioned, last year they had to take a bus to go out to practice. This time they just walk over to the field. So I don't think that's going to be a factor.
Very convenient thing. Facebook question: you think the Chargers players' comments on Jay Cutler will motivate Jay Cutler? I don't know what motivates Jay Cutler. I think Jay Cutler's been in this league long enough. I think he's a guy that's heard so many things thrown about him, whether it's criticism, whether it's appreciation or patting him on the back, whatever. He's been through the gauntlet before. I really don't think that affects him one way or another.
Here's the other thing too: is you're a professional player, especially in a case like this where the Dolphins haven't played a regular season game yet. This is their opener. Do you really think they need extra motivation? They're going to be as motivated as they possibly could be. And you're a former player. Did you really need anybody to say something bad about you to get you up?
Well, look, especially on opening day. If you're not motivated to play on opening day,
big problem.
Then you've got some big problems, bigger than a lot of people would think about it. But no doubt about that. But Cutler, I think it's going to be. I don't think anything is going to bother him at all, and it's just going to be how he goes out and protects the football. David Coffin 7. How has Pouncey looked this week? Healthy and he says healthy and hungry. Well, he's healthy.
He's very hungry.
Very hungry. I mean, this is a guy that was dying to get into these preseason games, trying to get into practice during training camp, and as Coach Gase said before, they kept him in bubble wrap, gave him some action so he could kind of knock the rust off. But now it's going to be, especially with the 16 schedule that goes 16 straight weeks. I think the goal for he and everybody associated with that offensive line is to get him as many games as possible. And look, it may be a situation where, it doesn't happen very often in the NFL, not for the Dolphins or really anybody in particular. But, if you get into a situation where there's a little bit of a little blowout city somewhere where you can maybe get them out of the game, but that really doesn't happen very much in the National Football League. So, it's just the question of how those hips are going to hold up may be the biggest question towards the success or failure of this football team throughout the course of this year. Certainly one of the big questions.
No doubt about it. I mean, he's a very, very key player, very important player on that offensive line. And Dolphins have been sticking with the one day on, one day off routine that they've had. Again, the idea is to minimize the possibility of anything happening to him. Obviously, under an ideal scenario, you'd like to see him be so healthy that he can practice every day. Yep. That's not the reality right now, and the Dolphins obviously are smart to do whatever they can to get him in the lineup as much as possible because he is really, really a key part of that offensive line.
Another Facebook question. You think there'll be many Dolphins at the game with only 30,000 seats? That's going to be interesting because, from what I'm hearing here is they're having a tough time selling out even 30,000 seats. Very expensive tickets out here, as would reflect the fact that they've only got 30,000 seats, and they've got to get revenue coming in somehow with those kind of numbers. But you've also got a fan base up here. You got a fan base up here that really doesn't care that much about them, and you got a fan base in San Diego that's so upset that they left that they're not going to come up here and support this football team. And I think both the LA Chargers and the LA Rams, I don't think you really know what the fan base is going to be for them until a few years down the road when they get in that new stadium in Inglewood.
Yep. And
now they've got a real home, and they've been down here for a little bit. And certainly for the Rams, it went a long way the way that they opened up the season last year. Jared Goff looked good. The team scored points, and so at least if you're a quasi Rams fan, I would think you're probably leaning on maybe checking out a game or two at that cavernous stadium that they play in up the road.
It's big. Man, they have some hope there. If you recall the game last year when the Dolphins played the Chargers in San Diego, I want to say that the stadium probably included half Dolphin fans, half Charger fans, if not even more Dolphin fans. So I would imagine we're looking at maybe a similar situation where it's going to be a lot of Dolphin fans.
It's just about, to me, it comes down to how much you want to pay for tickets, because they are pretty expensive down here. But I know this, and you know, as opposed to a lot of people that stay in South Florida, and you know, all the time, every time they can take a shot about, look how many Patriots fans are there, look how many Jet fans are here. But they're never on the road. Not that I expect them to be on the road, but really, Al, I mean, you've been on the road with this football team. They've got a pretty good following, whether it's East Coast, West Coast, Buffalo, New York. It doesn't matter. You know, historically, they've got a pretty good following with this football team, and like you said, maybe no more so than San Diego, based on what we saw last year.
It was actually impressive to see.
Periscope, who do you guys feel will have a breakout game for the Dolphins versus the Chargers? It's hard to say. I mean, you know, you really haven't seen this team play. You haven't seen them play in a regular season football game. You haven't seen them game plan. You haven't seen them do all those things. But, you know, I'm looking for, like everyone else, I'm looking for Devontae Parker to be the Devontae Parker that we've seen during training camp and during the preseason games. And I'm looking for Jay Ajayi. I think Jay Ajayi has looked, he got better last year than he was the year before, after a year when he kind of struggled with some injuries, got some playing time late, and then came out last year and became a Pro Bowler. And I tell you, he looks more confident and better to me this year than he did last year at this time.
Yeah, I think the logical guy to go with here is Parker, because based on what we saw in the preseason and the fact that he just looks so much better. Here's also another key factor going into this game is the Chargers not only have two good defensive ends, they have two good cornerbacks in Casey Hayward and Jason Verrett. Jason Verrett did not practice yesterday because of a knee injury. Now, if he winds up not playing, that's a big loss for the Chargers, or if he's hampered, that's a big situation for the Chargers and something the Dolphins can exploit, which leads me to believe even more that Parker could have a big day, or Kenny Stills on the outside. So I think the Dolphins could have a big game through the air.
This question I passed out earlier, and I passed up on it, but it's a good question. The question was, and I forget where it came from, was about, here he goes, the Periscope question. Are the Dolphins more of a no-huddle team now with Cutler? I think you saw as soon as Jay Cutler came in, that first game at Hard Rock Stadium that he played, came right out, went no huddle, went up tempo. He likes to get under center, and so I think that's what you're going to see. I think you're going to see, and I would say how Adam Gase would categorize the offense: up tempo, but not. You know, they want to get to the line of scrimmage quick.
Correct.
They don't necessarily want to get to the line of scrimmage quick, snap the ball quick, but they want to get out of the huddle to the line of scrimmage, put some pressure on the defense, not allow them time to make some make substitutions. And you've got a guy that understands where he wants to go, what he wants to do, can stand behind the center and get it done. I think that's a big advantage for this football team, and I would expect them to play a lot of up-tempo, no huddle in this game and really throughout the season. If injuries don't take that away from them.
And this is where Jay Cutler's familiarity with the offense comes into play, and that he knows the offense so well. Jarvis Landry had an interesting comment yesterday in describing the offense. He basically says, we're a no-huddle team that will huddle every once in a while.
Yeah.
So I think they do want to play at a fast pace. The flip side to that is if you go 3 and out, you're putting your defense right back on the field. And I know Adam Gase a lot of times last year lamented the fact that his defense was on the field for too many plays. That's something he wants to avoid. So, but if the offense is in a rhythm and moving the ball, I can definitely see them going like real quickly up tempo, no huddle.
How would you expect Adam Gase to come out and call this game? You think he's going to be conservative a little bit early on, or would you expect him to come out and try to put the pressure on him early, especially knowing you've got Bosa and Ingram, if you're going to throw the football, going to be breathing down your necks, because you can't look at tape of this football team and not have those two guys jump out and strangle you around the neck and let you know what it's going to be like all day long.
Correct. That's a very good question. I mean, we don't have anything to base it off of because we've only seen Jay Cutler in the preseason. This is a whole different animal. My gut feeling is they're going to come out throwing on early downs to avoid those third and long situations where Bosa and Ingram become bigger factors. Then on the other hand, I mean, you can certainly see them wanting to establish a Jay on the run. So, again, flip a coin. If I have to make a prediction, I say they're going to come out throwing.
I think the only thing I would oppose to that is I believe that this team, as much as they've got the ability to throw the ball down the field, I still think they want to establish the run first, and that'd be their base of this offense. The other guy I want to talk about, Julius Thomas, a little bit. He's a guy that comes in with some fanfare, had some of his best seasons under Adam Gase. You go ahead and you lose Deion Sims, so you bring in another guy here. You lost Charles Clay a couple years ago. Go out and get Anthony Fasano. Marquise Gray is still here, who did a good job last year. So that 3 tight end mix there, productivity-wise, how do you feel about that?
I think Julius Thomas has everything in place to really put up nice numbers, especially in the red zone. I think that's where he's really going to be a factor because obviously tight ends become bigger factors when the field is contracted and you have tighter windows. Didn't see a ton from him in the preseason, but again, I'm one of those who doesn't necessarily put that much stock in the preseason again because everything is so vanilla where you're trying to just basically get basic stuff in. I expect him to put up decent numbers, especially in the red zone. Fasano is going to be a nice factor in the running game, probably more than anything else. And Marquise Gray is a guy who's not only going to help in the running game when they go too tights, but also as a special teamer. Yeah,
and don't be surprised, I think, against this team, especially early on, if you don't see a little 3 tight in there with guys trying to help out those outside rushers and just maybe get a little chip on them, something to disrupt them a little bit, at least, especially with the guys that you've got, because between Gray and between Fasano, you certainly have guys that can block and they know what they're doing there. Not so much with Julius Thomas, who's going to be more of a pass catcher. But it's going to be interesting. I mean, it's been a long wait for everybody. I know Dolphin fans, we're looking for that home opener against the Tampa Bay Bucks, and we know that's been postponed until November, so it's 16 straight games for these guys. But I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it. I'm really just looking forward to seeing how much this product, and here's the thing I kind of keep going back to and mentioning, I don't think there's any question this is a better football team this year than they were last year. When you look at them on paper, personnel-wise, doesn't necessarily mean that the record is going to be better or the same as last year. Because I mean, if you watch games over the first couple of weeks, or the first week of the season, and then the Thursday game last night, I mean, these games all come down to the wire. It's come, a field goal late in the game, a late touchdown. I mean, the complexion of the game changes in that last 4 or 5 minutes of the football game, where more times than not, it seems like in the NFL, especially for the Dolphins last year, that last 4 or 5 minutes really dictated, half of the outcome of their games, it seemed like.
No, and what they did last year is they found a way to make the plays at the end of games to get them the record they wound up with. That's going to be the key. I'm fascinated by this opener because before every opener, there's a degree of uncertainty. We think we know what the Dolphins have. We think we know what they're going to do. But you really don't know until the regular season starts. I am very confident that Jay Cutler is really going to thrive and have a big, big year, reunited with Adam Gase, with the weapons he has around him, which are so much better than what he played with in Chicago in 2015. But you just don't know. And the other factor is normally it takes a little bit of time into a season. It's very rare, other than Dan Marino in '84, who came out like gangbusters against the Redskins. Usually it takes a little bit of time. So be very interesting to see what they come up with.
All right, well, it's Dolphins and Los Angeles Chargers Sunday, 4 o'clock Eastern Time kickoff. The Dolphins opener for the season. The home opener for the Los Angeles Chargers will get their first opportunity to play in front of their new fans here in LA. So that's going to be interesting. So it's going to be a great day. It's going to be a great opportunity for the Dolphins to get off on the right foot. And hopefully we'll be back Monday here on the Audible talking about a win, and then looking forward to another win the next week up in New York. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Let's get this one in the books, and then we'll look ahead after that. Alan, thanks for stopping by. Alain Poupart, you can catch him on Dolphins.com. I'm Kim Bokamper. We will see you again on Monday.